Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Through a Therapist's Eyes. I am still Chris Gazdick. Neil's behind the scenes, and this guy, Matthew Hanks, is hanging out with us for the month of February on our little podcast show. If you're happening to find us for the first time, this is where we disseminate information. We blow up stereotypes and myths about mental health and substance abuse. I like to say you get personal insights directly from a therapist in your own home and in your own car. We really like to see the lens through a therapist, but definitely always be aware it's not the delivery of therapy services in any way. In the world that we live in, I got to give the disclosures, man, right? You know? Let me see. 5 stars on Apple iTunes. The podcast review sites really help us out. Please do that. We got some cool things coming up in 2022. Not ready to make an announcement, but I'll start catching a buzz about what we can expect, that we're doing some new things. So more on that, I guess, I think we're targeting a couple of weeks kind of time frame. But I'm pretty excited about it. I think you guys are going to really enjoy what we're going to make available. So stay tuned for that. This is the human emotional experience. We endeavor to figure this thing out together. Interact with us. Contact at throughatherapist'seyes.com. Helps us to talk with you, get together with you, leave your name and email so we can respond to you. We really like to get these interactions together, man. Actually, I'm going to start off with one that we got today. And maybe I'll have time for the current event as well. Maybe I'll do an honorable mention of the current event. So, Sherry emailed in. Check this out, Neil. I might need your help with this, actually, because to see what you think about it, because you remember the show that we did with Adam Cloninger. He was a guest co-host probably a couple months back. I was really impressed with Sherry's feedback about this particular show. She was listening to, what was it, Neil? Social dating in the social media environment, or the apps. What do you remember by chance what the name was? Probably a couple months ago. It was dating in the social media environment, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, and I didn't prepare myself because I just put it on my head. Because I was so fascinated at what she talked about, man. She was listening to the show and, kind of made some statements / questions about what she heard us talking about. And what she was talking about is the pacing, right? The pacing of dating and dating interactions. And so if you think about it, she was talking about when you do this person to person, you have to meet and greet. You make eye contact across the room kind of thing. You think about what you're going to say. They're observing you. You're observing them. Maybe you walk up. You say something, and then they say something. You kind of go back after you get your drink. You kind of, oogle and google and flirt a little bit and whatever. This is over the course of what, Matt? Like 2-3 hours maybe. You do this, and you're still in the proxemics, fancy word of saying you're close physically to each other, right? Mm-hmm. Well, she said on these social media apps, Neil, like your pacing is totally weird. It's abnormal. It's not typical. Like you might do that within 5 minutes on your couch to 6 different guys, right? What does that do to your psyche when you're dating?
I mean, that's like speed dating on steroids, because you get that rush of like, I'm interested in this dozen people, and then you wait to see who responds, and you might get a fast response, you might not, but then you get that can be a huge up and down, like that emotional toll of, that rush and then that waiting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the whole texting. You get those dots on your text from people doing it, and you're just waiting in anticipation.
And make no mistake, you might sit there and think in this current event here, well, in this listener feedback, you might say, oh, well, Sherry's different. That doesn't bother me. I don't get that euphoric rush. I just, I'm hanging out on these things. Yes, you do. I'm telling you. When you get a ding and a buzz back and somebody's interested, or they wave, or what is it, wink at you. I don't know these apps, to be honest with you, because I haven't dated. But
no idea.
You've never tried them.
Yeah.
I don't know that you could even imagine, because I've had conversations about it. I've never done it. Mm-hmm. You haven't even thought about this. I would venture to guess, Matthew, you have no idea what it's even like.
Well, there was no such thing.
Yeah.
I mean, in the days of me back dating, 15 years ago plus, there's no such thing as an app.
Right.
I mean, cell phones existed, but
the biggest thing
the
you
idea
had
of
is
a dating
newspaper ad.
Oh.
Oh yeah. Now, don't make fun of that. I see the man's facial expression.
No,
the fact is, my mother met my stepdad that way.
Yeah.
I talked about that. And it worked. It was different. There's a lot of crazy stuff on there, too. I know. We ain't talking about the back of Craigslist. Or, no, what was it? Abby something? What was that weird one? That, I don't know. I'm blanking. But there was a real weird one where you get the funky sexual stuff that's just weird.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
gross.
Yeah, but Sherry, you made a great point, and you really triggered my brain to think about that, how abnormal the dating is on social media dating sites. And I'm not down on them, guys, so please don't send hate mail at me. I'm not criticizing them. I'm just pointing out she's right, how very, very psychologically different that process is as opposed to the normal way that we have geared our neurons, geared our brain systems, our limbic system, with oxytocin and our hormone systems all have had like eons, right? Since time began of the human race, geared a certain way. And now, boom, all of a sudden we have a completely different way of meeting, greeting, and dating. That I don't know what the outcome of that is, but it's a fascinating thing to talk about. Real quick honorable mention. I happened to see the Department of Justice, our lovely Department of Justice in the government, has authorized. We did, remember, Neil, a current event on safe injection sites. Tell me what that laugh is.
If it's just about what they're giving now, that taxpayers are funding, and that they're giving, what is it?
I don't know that it's taxpayer funded.
It has to come from, if it's from the government, taxpayers have to pay it, don't they?
No. This is, you remember we did a current event on New York, and one other site in the country is doing safe injection sites where people that are in the substance abuse field want to allow heroin addicts and drug addicts that are doing their stuff on the street. They bring their own stuff into these safe sites, and they supervise the actual use of their own drugs. And the proponents would suggest that, they've saved many people's lives because of immediate overdosing, incidentally unrelated but related. I saw a spot where fentanyl is just going through the roof in the substance abuse field, out of control. Like, people are dying because they don't know what they're taking. They don't know they're even getting it. And so they can give Narcan, like, boom, right on the spot. And potentially, an addict overdoses, and that's it is a good opportunity for them to get real about, like, holy crap, I just checked out, and now I came back. Maybe I need to do something with my life. But the Department of Justice decided that they're going to allow more to open up. That's what happened.
Because the one thing I saw was, I think the Biden administration was, they suggested giving crack pipes, I think, out now.
Oh, come on. Seriously? Is that documented?
Yeah.
Wow. No, it's all over the news today.
It is.
Today?
That's
it's a $30 million grant. That's why you're saying government funded.
Yeah.
But that's what everyone's talking about in the news. It's a $30 million grant, and I guess included in the grant was,
the provision
it's called smoking kits.
Okay.
But it's
which
crack pipes, and I heard it described as chapstick and crack pipes was what was in the smoking kits, and that's part of this $30 million grant. I didn't have the time to read
to know what's going on.
Too much in depth, but I'm telling you, you check the news sites just today, and it's all over the news.
Which could correlate with yours talking about making more safe sites for drug users to go and be monitored as they do it. They could be tied together. It's just, of course, most people bring up the obvious
chapstick and crack pipes.
So when you log on and you see, like, why is everyone talking about crack pipes? That's where we are with it.
Oh, okay.
As of today.
Yeah. Well, I don't know anything about that one, but I do know the safe injection sites is definitely, and I forget where I landed on it before. I think I was kind of leaning towards, that might be, a helpful thing to help people with addiction, but it was ever so slight of a lean because there's we covered on there when we were talking about it. I was talking about it with a client, and the guy was like, yeah, you give a safe site. It's like, okay, I can try harder doses, and this is going to be better. I mean, addicts have a way different way of thinking about things than what is typical rational thought. So, if it has potential helping people, I'm kind of like, hey, let's go ahead and try, but definitely has some fallbacks to it for sure.
Oh,
And this giving people pipes, if that's the case, I definitely don't see that. That doesn't make any sense, but I'll make that statement. Let's get on to what we're doing today here. So thanks for that, guys. And like I said, we'd like to tell you, stay in touch. And Sherry, awesome, man. Thank you for responding and reaching out. You guys listened to that as a model, man. That was a great point that she made. I never thought of it, and just, she was experiencing it. And so she helped us see that angle with stuff. So what we're doing today is why do we do what we do? Implicit bias. We're really playing off of what we did last week because I got halfway through it, and I'm like, yo, this is way too psychologically meaty because of the things that we're talking about and the depthiness of it. And I just did not want to be rushed with it because I think it's such a profoundly important and prevalent thing that we're all dealing with. So before we do, man, what's the phone number? How do people find Mr. Matthew Hanks and his hanksrealty.com setup? I want to make sure they know how to get you.
well, you'll find us online at hanksrealtygroup.com. And as far as the phone number, 704-931-8480.
Rewind. 704-931-8480.
480.
I almost had the whole thing, man. I'm impressed because my brain is not sharp. How you feeling over there today?
Feeling great.
Yeah.
It's a good topic.
Yeah, it is. My brain's foggy, man.
No, we'll make it through it.
I'm not going to lie.
This week, looking forward to talking about the positive side of implicit bias. Last week was more focused on the negative aspects.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Yeah, we're going to touch on that a little bit. Real quick, let me just explain my foggy. I don't know if it's getting older. I don't know if I've ever been directly honest about it. I'm 49 years old, man. Dude, as you get older, man, it's like I don't know what happens to your sleep cycle and stuff. Like I was wicked tired. I was exhausted yesterday, so I went home and they're like, dude, 9:30. I just crashed. I slept so hard, and the next thing I knew, I was hearing somebody coming to bed, and it's 12:30. Like 12:30, 1 o'clock, and I'm like, oh, okay. Next thing I knew, it was like 2 o'clock, and then I'm up. And I'm like, my body's like, dude, you had enough. It's time to get up. And I'm like, well, no, it's not. It's too, So, I'm just up, and I'm like, geez, and did some good reading, finished my book and all, or got close to it. And then I got tired again at 5 o'clock. And I'm like, okay, so now my body tells me I need more. And so I sleep a little bit more. And then it's time to get up, and I'm like, I don't want to get up. The dude is jacked up, man. And then I had 7 of 7 today therapy, so you might have to help me out, brother.
Well, let's roll with it.
You're gonna have to help me out, make sense out of this stuff. So, What is implicit bias, sir? Popping you on the spot. I'm curious what you recall, what stuck in your brain, what you've been thinking about since we had that conversation. Just to review.
Well, one of the things I thought about is, as we described it, that it was something that affects every human being and every decision every day. And you were describing it in that way, kind of painting the picture how broad of a topic it is and how it affects human interaction. And so I don't know that...
Every single human, every single day. That's a big statement, and I agree.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and I remember you describing it that way, but I think if you would have asked me before the show and we covered that, it wouldn't have been something I realized that it's affecting all of us all the time, every interaction. So,
isn't that crazy? If you just stop and let that sink in last show, like if you're listening to this one and tuning in, you definitely have to push pause, just go back one episode. You got to hear that one first, honestly, because we're not going to go in. We're reviewing a little bit. We're just going to touch it though. We gave great examples, I think, of in your marriage and in parenting, societal issues like police and what happens with implicit bias with police. There was a Science Versus article. I hope you guys listened to it because there's a lot of great material that was in that particular episode from 11 November 2019, and that's when this show was actually born in my brain. Those interactions are constant and chronic. Remember the difference between implicit bias and explicit bias?
So explicit is where you are with your consciousness, what you can think about and talk about.
Perfect. Yeah.
And how it manifests itself with your actions, explicitly.
Yeah. Concrete, black and white, stated clearly with your cognition and your frontal cortex in operation. Yeah. And then implicit bias
is the things that are causing you to think the way you think, act the way you act, but you don't even realize it.
Yeah. The subconscious is a powerful thing, and we talked about that last week. We won't go too far into that tonight, but dang, the amazing aspect of your subconscious. I like to use the example of a childhood home. If you remember, I said your subconscious, it knows to the exact number how many steps your childhood home with steps has. I mean, I just get amazed at that type of thing. And then what happens with trauma experience and how you repress it and you don't even remember that it happened. But it's absolutely, and I think you used the metaphor on that terabyte hard drive, it's just sapped over there. And you can pull from it. And you don't even know you're pulling from it, but your computer, which is you, is absolutely using all of that data. And you tripped me out when you were talking about some smart dude talking about doing that on a computer or something. What was that?
If I remember right, it was Elon Musk.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You know, saying that at some point that computer equipment will be able to access that memory.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fascinating?
I don't even know how to think about that, man. I really don't. As we get computers operating and computing faster and doing all that, I mean, y'all, I don't know what we're in for with all of that in the way. We just mentioned social media. I mean, you know, I'm not one to bash on technology, but it's definitely different. What you got, Neil? You got thoughts?
Well, going back to that, there was actually a thing I saw where there was someone with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and they actually hooked neurons up, and he actually sent a text using his brain.
Wow.
Like that kind of goes back to the idea of starting to grab that information, understanding what the brain's sending. But yeah, supposedly he sent a text just with his mind. Because with ALS, your mind's perfectly functional. The body just shuts down.
Just can't use your fingers to
text. You can't use anything. You know, it gets to that point. So that's the start of that technology breaking down your brain and starting to understand what's going on. And I'm kind of scared if they can start seeing those implicit bias, you know, those things that you have in there that you don't even know. That's kind of scary.
What? Oh my gosh. That's, yeah, my brain could just go into that because what you just said neurologically, if I heard you correctly, a massive computer process can get into your automatic thinking process that is operational with wavelengths, neuronic firing, amygdala, fight or flight, data in a computer coming out on the screen. And that's almost a great analogy for the difference between implicit and explicit bias, right? Because what the computer screen tells you you're thinking is potentially tapping into the implicit biasness. Whereas you think you're thinking, let me change that word. The computer screen in that case, if you followed this, would be tapping into your core beliefs, your implicit bias, and literally telling you with typed text what you believe and what you need to do. And you don't even know it because you think you believe explicitly, like we just explained, something completely different with completely different behaviors attached to it. That would be crazy. Did you follow that? Does that make sense?
Well, I did, and you know where my mind went with it is, I wonder how much of a stretch it would be if they can read the information to rewriting it and actually manipulating it.
Yeah, that's when we're going to get technology, I believe. You know, when we start to develop. This is years off, guys, I'm sure, but when we start to develop an understanding of our body's hormones, and Dr. Craig Chepke talked about, you know, the psychedelic, the S-ketamine treatment on gabapentin, which we don't deal with in my field at all to date, except for the now FDA-approved S-ketamine treatment. We don't deal with gabapentin at all. But how many other neurotransmitters in operation that are a part of all of this? I mean, it's quite dynamic. We've covered that on shows past, but when we start being able to kind of laser zap that stuff and whatever, you know, things that we might be able to learn, yeah, we could probably literally change your OCD so that you're not washing your hands 10 times an hour. Like, I believe we may neurologically get to that point, but we're quite a minute away from that.
Well, I bet the accessing of information, maybe I'm going out on a limb, I bet it's not that far away. If it's to the point like Neil was just describing, where there's always that interaction, It wouldn't
Yeah, but you
surprise
gotta-
me if it's that far away.
I mean, you got a lot of ethics and stuff there too. With genome mapping and designer baby topics. And,
Well, I'm not saying should we.
Yeah, right,
I'm
exactly.
saying could we?
There's a lot of ethics that'll go in that, and what we can do bounces up against that because you're literally talking about beginning to manipulate people's hormone body structures. That's Matrix kind of stuff. The movie Matrix. It really is. How you feel, I can manipulate by sending signals, whatever, to your body, triggering hormone explosions. Yeah, that probably might be possible. Crazy to think. I don't know. We lost half the audience because we're in Never Never Land, but that's fascinating.
I bet it's not as far away as we might think it would be.
You never think it is. I mean, we went from telephone to radio to TV, and now we're zipping past all this technology stuff.
Now we're speed dating.
Light years. Yeah. Yeah. So the positive aspect of implicit bias is an interesting thing. As you listened to the conversation last week, towards the end, I think we came to a realization of, wow, wait a minute. This is all negatively focused. And I made the point that, if you have implicit bias, just automatic goggles that you have on where you see the world, that's the metaphor. They manipulate like everything you see through the lens of these goggles. Those can be positive just as much as negative. What have you been thinking about that, Matthew?
On the positive side?
Yeah, have you been thinking about that this week?
Well, you think about some of the things that people can make it through in life, the challenges that come across, and how they end up dealing with that. Or let's say somebody's wronged in a situation and they're able to overcome that. And maybe it may be positive bias in their mind that certain people are good. And maybe that helps them to forgive through certain situations.
We have, believe it or not, y'all, we do have, everyone realize, really healthy life lessons that we learn. Sometimes, every now and again, us parents, people do get something right, and we teach a really healthy life lesson. There's a lot of hope in that, because if you're doing your best and you're actually able to get a grand moment in a life lesson with your son, and I'm being a little silly about it because I know we have many. We got many negative ones as well, but we really do teach positive life lessons, and that is potentially becomes an implicit bias as well. But here's an interesting thing that I thought about. So we're going to talk a lot tonight about how to accomplish the second goal of implicit bias management. I'll put that term on it. The first goal is de-escalation, if you remember. I'm going to comment on that a little bit more as well. But in order to get to the second goal of managing your implicit bias, you were on point, and it's a totally accurate perspective that first you really have to really understand that you have them, right? And the way that we really go into identifying that these are active, here's a perfect way, is to scan your emotional and physical body, like your system. Understand when you get worked up or something says something to you, like something's off, you feel that adrenaline, you feel stuff going on. I mean, you know what I mean. And I think everyone's experienced that. That indicates, hold up. Even what you're saying might be different than what you're feeling, and you can identify that going on and then go backwards to really honestly examine what racial thing am I really believing here? What parental thing am I really operating from? I know what I'm saying and I know what I'm thinking, but this operates on my subconscious level, so how do I manage that? The indicator is your body just told you by adrenaline and cortisone, and you're hopped up. I don't know what happens when you have a positive implicit bias in place. I have no idea. I don't think you have really any body magnification of experience. It's just, I'm grounded in this. I'm solid in this. People are good. I love people. so I don't have a lot of threat in my life. Those are just implicit bias statements, potentially. How do you know they're there? It's probably going to match your explicit bias, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of incongruence there. So my point is, I think that's just kind of an automatic process that I don't know how you identify. I don't think you can do anything about it. I guess you don't want to do anything about it, but you follow what I'm saying there? That's a tough thing to really identify.
Mm-hmm.
The negative ones you can if you know what you're looking for.
I don't know that you can, though. I mean, how would you identify it?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
You have to go off of the explicit behaviors or something that you can monitor or recognize or measure in some way, something you can notice externally,
mm-hmm.
and then try to get to it that way. Like what drives, I see Chris. Chris is a friend. Out of Chris, I see this, and this. So these are all the belief systems inside of you that are driving that behavior, causing you to do what you do.
That I love the way you just laid that out, because that is a way for you to identify. That's a good point. So in psychological or clinical terms, what I heard you say is, hey, there's something about, I'll turn it over, Matthew, that I'm looking at that I'm really drawn to. I really like. It makes me feel peaceful. Well, what is it about Matthew that does that? I'm curious. I don't understand.
So what if it's something like that, implicitly, I feel that, I need to be my brother's keeper. We should care about each other.
Yeah.
That friendships matter above a lot of other things in life. That's what those are my value system.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. And so how does that manifest in that when I'm around people and I feel that you and I have a relationship and we're in a friendship, I'm going to be there for you.
Yeah.
When you talk, I listen.
A sense of
when you look at
loyalty.
me, and you can sense that about that. So maybe that's what draws, and so that it externally, explicitly is what you notice and what you see, but it's the internal and the implicit that is what's fueling that behavior.
So maybe there's a magnification there, thinking out loud. This is just fresh off my brain, really, in the moment. Maybe the magnification is when you really feel strongly about something, and you might not even really know why, and then you examine that, and then you begin to think back maybe like to Dad, who was really strong with his brother, and you remember an event, I'm making this up, where your dad just went and mortgaged the house. You were old enough to understand that, and saved his brother from certain financial despair, and that taught you something. Oh wow, maybe that's why I'm super loyal to my friends, because I learned you really need to stand up for people. I like the way we just played that out. It answers a little bit of a question. Maybe that's a magnification. You don't really know why you feel so driven, to behave or to do what you do. It might be a positively based implicit bias that's really buried in there. That's good stuff, man. Do you do psychology for a living?
Well, working with people every day, is going to lead you there. But I consider myself a specialist in any way. But I do find it extremely fascinating to the idea of what causes people to do what they do.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is just fascinating, and I guess it's part of what you do every day.
It is.
But you described our podcast today as exploring human emotions, or going into that topic and all. I'm like, oh, great! It's only the most complicated topic that exists on Earth, right? Human emotions. Like,
here
we go. Yeah,
one of the.
Buckle up. Here we go.
But you know what's funny about that, and I would say to all our listeners out there, this is why I love doing the show, because and I mean what I say when I say let's figure this out together, because simply thinking about these things, talking about these things, I made the slight funny statement that do you work for psychology for a living? But you can figure them out when we're focusing on it, because. And you might not have science and and all of that's totally grounded in, but there's a sense in us. We're made the way that we're made, and you are the expert on what's going on with you internally by far beyond any stinking psychologist or licensed clinical therapist like I am. Like you. You might not understand all of you, and that's where we can come in together and figure those things out together. So there's a plug for therapy, if you will, if you're out there listening. So, that positive nature is really pretty cool. And And I think that, that should hopefully give a lot of hope that when you land on something that's really grounded, solid, and secure, feel good about that, because you might very well be appropriately installing, and I use that word sometimes, installing an implicit bias process that person really agrees with. Your son, your friend, iron sharpens iron, right? We do that together, you and I. You have potential, particularly during intense time periods in somebody's life, to make a really positive influence. We think about, I saw a lot more online about the negative side, because that's what's sticky, and that's where we get to. And I think that's why we had such a strong lean when we're talking about implicit bias and the dangers that it imposes.
Mm-hmm.
It imposes some inherent dangers, because you don't even know that these negative things are buzzing around as strong as they are. And that's one of the reasons why this topic's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's two goals, and we're going to spend a lot of time today on the second goal. But we highlighted the importance that the science verses reminded me of. Remember, I was going to ad hoc this whole section that we're doing today and really highlight the importance of de-escalation. What you remember about that? You remember anything about de-escalation?
It's if recognizing that your mind is going to a certain place
Automatically.
and being able to recognize it and taking positive steps to keep yourself from going there. Is that
No? And I'm glad I asked you that way. That's an important, very important distinction. The second goal, you're citing perfectly the second goal.
okay?
To keep yourself from going there. Okay? The assumption is you can't stop yourself from going there. That's part of the problem. That's why you say some of the crazy stuff you say when you're going at it with your spouse. Or I explained, I lose my ever-loving mind, unfortunately, way more often than I would like with my children.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrible to admit, I said last week, but it's
Mm-hmm.
true.
Mm-hmm.
We're not easily going to stop that. So we're not easily going to stop ourselves from going to these implicit biases. That's where de-escalation comes into place. So instead of trying to do that, there's a goal of that. That's the second goal. We're going to spend a lot of time on that.
Mm-hmm.
But the first goal, which makes an immediate impact, is this de-escalation. So you don't know why you're worked up. You don't know why you're all edgy. You don't know why you're saying what you're saying. Stop saying what you're saying. Matter of fact, stop saying anything. This is the idea of don't parent when you're angry. You were really hot on last week, right? So you can't stop yourself from going to the implicit bias, but you can de-escalate yourself and get out of that space that your implicit bias creates for you, imposes on you, so that you can then get more rational, more purposeful in teaching the life lesson or working this problem out with your spouse or whatever. So de-escalation is the first goal, and that can very easily be done if you get good at breathing, taking a walk. Let's just watch a movie and then we'll come back to this. I don't know what I'm going to do with this parenting problem. I'll think about it. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll ask my friends. Step it down, right? Do you see how that doesn't prevent you from going to the space that the implicit bias gets you, but it stops you from doing stupid stuff because of it? Does it see that very important distinction?
Yes.
That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I love the way you fell into that, because I think we all think that way, But now we get into the meat of, okay, so we're good at de-escalating. We understand and believe that we have these implicit thoughts and morals and, core beliefs about life and people. We know we have them. We may identify some of them. We've talked a little bit about how to backwards get into identifying them. But now let's say, okay, we want to do the hard work and we really want to get into ourselves and see what we can do about changing these things that are automatically assumed as cold, hard facts in our subconsciousness. Man, that's a process now. How daunting does that sound given what we've talked about with implicit bias to you, Matthew?
Tapping into areas of my psyche and my mind that I don't even feel like I've got access to, and now I'm going to not only see it and recognize it, but I'm going to manipulate it and change it. I mean, it seems overwhelming.
Right. I love the way you put all that, because this is incredibly valuable work to do, and the pace is probably incredibly slow, because you have to be very methodical. Because remember, all the while, your explicit beliefs. Yes, I'm a good Christian. I love everybody. Everybody's to be trusted. I'm using my arms to sort of be mocking a little bit, because we hear a lot of that, but then we see the people's behavior. Why do we do what we do? Because you have implicit biases that are driving a whole set of different things, and you don't even know it. And I'm not trying to be mean on religion or anything, but I'm trying to get us to really stop, pay attention. Why are you having the affairs? Why are we way over helicoptering our kids? Aren't we supposed to let them live? Why are we, making horrible business practices and flat stealing? Why are we doing these things? Because we see ourselves as good people. I'm a good person, and you are. You're lovely as you are. But we want to look at what's driving some of this crap that we've got going on, right? This is in our face. This is in your face, and you're looking at your face, and that's a difficult thing to do. I don't know about you, but I just like to go along believing I'm a wonderful, friendly person all the time, and jolly and happy, and the face that I put on for the public is the way I really feel. Mm-hmm. Not quite. So let's get into that. How do we do that? How do we get into that? All right, I brainstormed a lot of this, and we'll go down through my ideas, and then there was a cool article that I kind of tagged on as well, if we have time, and I think we will, and that'll be a little bit of a checks and balances to see how we did. So the first big thing I want to maybe suggest here off the get-go is, how successful do you think you will be at examining and changing, or even knowing that you have these implicit biases by yourself?
Maybe it depends on how self-aware you are.
Yeah. I don't think you hardly have a shot.
So
I really don't.
Zero chance.
I'm not going to say zero, but I don't know that you really have a legitimate shot because of what the power of your psychological system is. There's a reason why it's subconscious. There's a reason why you've repressed this trauma experience. You don't even remember what happened. I have people in therapy all the time that, as I get a long-term relationship built, we start stumbling upon things that they didn't even know happened in their life. With stronger things like that, the psychological dynamic of repression, you don't have a shot because you don't even know it happened. Mm-hmm. So it has to come with interaction, safe and secure interactions with others. The loving touch of another person can give you the safety and encouragement to involve yourself in that, because you're not alone. But let's back off that ledge and just say people that have that implicit bias combating with their explicit bias that we just explained. You live in your thoughts. If your thoughts, before you even know what your thoughts are created from something implicit, such as racism sometimes very much is. You don't even know you're racial in the way that you're thinking. And so explicitly, you believe you're whatever, but implicitly, before you even had that explicit thought, it's already in drive mode. How do you recognize that? Not dramatic, nothing really weird and woo-woo, but I don't think you have much of a shot of identifying that and working to manage that alone. See what I'm saying?
So is this back to the iron sharpens iron that you spoke of?
Yes. What do you think happens in iron sharpening iron? Right? When you see somebody operating some way, you love them and you care about them, and you have a very different, even if you don't know it, you have a very different implicit bias than what the other person has. What's likely to happen? You're going to compare notes. You really might not even know that you're comparing your both implicit biasness, but you are. And that actually forces you to examine a little bit closer. Maybe both swords get sharper because you're both looking at what might be operational and didn't even know it. Right? That can't happen alone. You're just in operation. You're just moving. You're just grooving. You're just living. But when you come across an inconsistency between two people, just being friends or, co-church members or Cub Scout leaders, whatever, Girl Scout leaders, when you connect with other people, you culturally begin to develop, here's a whole nother level that we won't get into, cultural implicit biasnesses. Is that a word? Right? And think about that for a second. Just let that sink in. And then we're going to get off of that because that'll take us, that's too much. So if I made a good case that this is really difficult to do alone, you really need to do it with other people. Certainly a therapy environment, safe environments are probably a prerequisite. So how good are you at being able to feel vulnerable and have those conversations? How willing are you to really discuss things and open up to stuff you might not even know is there? This takes a good friend. This takes a safe environment. This takes a process and retouching it multiple times. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Much more effective together than alone. Alone, I'm going to maintain the bold statement, you kind of almost don't have a shot. Even if you're stupid self-aware. By very definition, you can't be aware of something that's implicit. Crazy?
I'm following where you're going with that.
Okay. So let's look at some of the things that we've got in how to actually engage in that process. I said prerequisite, admit we have them, and then work to identify them. We talked about that. Talk about tacit learning. I'm not going to go there because we discussed that last show in episode 58 and 59. From episode 103, Challenge the Assumptions We Live By. There's a lot there with this topic, guys. That's a really good one to listen to that Casey and I did. Okay? So, allow for and ask for positive feedback. What's assumed in allow for and ask for positive feedback? Right? You're with somebody. Back to that, you can't do it alone. So, let me use a for example here that pops in my mind, Matthew. How comfortable is it these days to have political conversations with people?
It may be more difficult than ever.
I'm almost to the point of taking my brother's attitude of, I don't want to do it. I used to love doing that. I really did. This political environment sucks. Yeah, I'll make that statement. I'm sorry if it pisses anybody off, but it does. And I don't know that I even want to have that conversation. Why? Because if I actually invite more feedback on what it is that I'm thinking and seeing about any particular topic, let's just say the southern border, right, as a random topic, and I state something and I invite you to give me feedback, what am I liable to get? Right? Particularly if we disagree. Now, you didn't see this on the audio-only version, but I blew my head back, threw my arms up, and pretended like I was just overrun. How vulnerable is it to actually ask for, hey, Matthew, I'm worked up about, there's something in my life, but, I'm really fearful about my kid, and he's doing this, and he's doing that. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do. Here's the situation, man. Whew. What do you think? Do you think people have conversations like that very often?
Not with strangers.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to have that trust built in a friendship, I think, before you'd be that vulnerable.
It's tough. Scary. Intimidating. Potentially shameful. Guilt-ridden. Those are powerful things that's going to hold you back. But if you get into, which is why, by the way, a very safe environment, with a therapy environment, or maybe with your pastor, or in a small group, or in an AA meeting, or in a relationship with your sponsor, or people that you really get intimately close with in friendship. Maybe your spouse, but that's loaded because there's a lot of emotion there. Those are places that you can seek out and allow people to kind of pour into you a little bit and put some checks and balances. And from time to time, you're going to find some incongruencies, and that person can help you identify political or parental or financial implicit bias beliefs, and you them. Mm-hmm. You them in return, right? That is a huge, huge reality, okay? Focus on little successes. The jar of success, the feel-good file. Craig's talked about this on our show, and I think with us, privately offhand. You know what the jar of success is? You remember him talking about all of that? By chance?
Where you have a way to go back and remind yourself of all your successes along the way.
Yeah. I have a feel-good file, literally, right over there to my left, and I pull it out every now and again when I'm worried about something or worked up or doubting something, insecure about something, and it's a great reminder. Particularly going back to the positive-based implicit biases that we have, that we might not explicitly think about, but implicitly we know and understand. When you've had these great moments and you've had these implicit bias development positive moments, you can go back to that. And that's psychologically what builds you up and encourages you to conquer the world. That takes our success manuals and books that we read in Mastermind to a different level, doesn't it?
Sure does.
Can you comment about that? I'm curious, because that's a cool thought.
Well,
how does that place what we know to be successful in business in a different light?
Being reminded of the successes along the way. Well, it's important because you can get so run down sometimes with the challenges that you face, and just being reminded that of all the times that you've won along the way. Sports teams are great at it.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at those things before as you're running out of the tunnel onto the field. Yeah. Be reminded of the legacy and the history and all the past successes, and let's go do it one more time. You've got it inside of you.
Oh man, yeah. Bam. It occurs to me that we hear people that are talking about success manuals in business, the 7 habits of most successful people and stuff like that people love to catch on to.
Yeah.
This is, I think, the psychological basis for that.
Yeah.
And how we repair or examine or remind ourselves to confront the negative implicit bias that's probably operational. A feel-good file, a do-good jar, those types of history with successes in a sports team. That regenerates your ability to combat what you believe you can't do because of implicit bias.
Well, I remember being taught, and I don't know where this was from, but the thing that you're looking for from your father as you're growing up is whether or not you have what it takes, because the father love is oftentimes about achievements.
You can do anything you want to do, son. Sky's the limit. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And the mother love is more just being. No matter what you do, no matter what you achieve or don't achieve, your mama's going to love you, and you know that.
Yeah.
But the daddy love, the father love is, when you achieve. Son, what have you accomplished? Did you make the football team? Did you score the touchdown? Those types of things. And so kids need to hear from their dad that they have what it takes to make it. It's one of the big things that as you grow up, that you're wanting to hear, or you're longing to hear from your dad, is that, yes, whether you call it the blessing or whether you call it the affirmation from the father figure, but you're looking to, as you're growing up, you're looking to hear from that.
A parent is trying to install an implicit bias about your ability and what you can accomplish and what the opportunities are, which might be combating against what the world is trying to teach you. You don't have enough money. You don't have enough fame. You don't have enough Nike Jordan shoes. Who was it that was talking about, Neil, that, oh, it was Casey, wasn't it? Her kid was like, did you buy me fake Nikes? Because the world was teaching her kid, you're not good enough because you got fake Nikes. And she's like, did I do that to my kid? Like, I don't even know.
No, the mother didn't.
You're
the world's doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember, it reminds me of a time, I can speak to this. It reminds me of a time I was on the way to dinner with my family, and my oldest son asked me, he said, Dad, do you think I could ever be a Navy SEAL?
Wow, yeah.
He said, do you think I could be a Navy SEAL?
Yeah.
And Chris, there was something that overcame me.
Oh, wow.
It was like something possessed my body and my response to him. And they had all eaten. I mean, I started in at that moment when he asked that. And we all the way through the line to order the food, to sit down and eat, and everyone was done eating, and my food's still sitting in front of me because I was still just going.
Oh, wow.
Because it was inside of me that if there's anything that I want my child to understand, I mean, especially my oldest son, or both of us, yes, you can. Absolutely you can.
That's a powerful and poignant example of something that might be in a positive implicit bias that you're trying and desperately wanting to install into the life teachings to your son. And, I'm thinking of a young lady out there who says, Mommy, can I be president of the United States someday? And I know that's a little more charged, right? The female, gender gaps that we can have and all. Yes, daughter, you can absolutely do that.
Of course you can. Absolutely you can.
But it goes against some of what the world is teaching us all the while. So there's this ebb and flow, right? There's this battle that we're trying to go and wage. The battle within. People talk about that. This is it, in a large extent, what we're talking about today. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
But the positive bias, though, inside, I feel like is that, the set of core values and what I believe it is my job as a dad to make sure those boys understand that.
Yeah.
And girl, got a daughter as well. But I'm talking about when it comes to the Navy SEALs, that they have it inside of them to do that. All they have to do is want it bad enough. I mean,
see, the tricky thing is there's an implicit nature to what you're saying now. I think. I'm not sure. I'll say this, and I think we need to move on and get off of it. But you're speaking implicitly. I'm sorry, explicitly in what you believe. But when you weren't eating your food, that felt more like something implicit because you don't know why you weren't eating. You didn't even realize you weren't eating, right? And it might be congruent. There might be congruence there. But sometimes there's incongruence there. In fact, a lot of times there's incongruence there. But that's a moment when you're experiencing something like that. Like, what's going on with me? There's something to answer there. And it's really worthwhile to do these things, to backtrack, to take some iron sharpening iron, to really take some time, meditate on it, work on it. Set your tacit learning on it. I know that might not make sense if you didn't hear that episode, and let your spirit kind of work that out. And it's cool stuff. So there's that kind of differential a little bit. So let's move on with goal setting. I mean that made it on my list, right? Of good old goal setting. I said, these are things that when you set goals for yourself, explicitly, purposefully. Part of the benefit there that you might not even realize is it might be attacking some of your implicit bias. I had a goal of reading 12. I'm making this up. Reading 12 books this year. That was my explicit goal. Why didn't I get to it? Well, what's implicitly holding you back? What is something there that you really had a burning desire to do this? A belief and a moral code and compass that this is something that I should be doing, and then you didn't. Well, that sets up an opportunity to see. Well, why didn't I? This probably happens with finances a lot. I've got financial goals. I didn't meet them. They were burning inside of me to do. Goal setting sets up an opportunity to kind of see, well, what is going on with me that I didn't do that? Casey and I were talking, and she kind of made it really an important point to speak to people's implicit minds, I think, about being enough. So you've remembered a few episodes ago with Casey. Implicitly, you might not believe that I'm enough. Shame, the guilt, and I need more. I need to do more. I don't produce enough. I haven't parented well enough. I'm not a good enough dad. I'm not a good enough mom. You are enough. And when you set goals and look at these things with friends, do these things in combination that I'm listing here, You begin to attack that implicit bias that you didn't even know you don't think you're enough. See? If you really get into the weeds with that a little bit, I'm not saying get stuck in it, but if you get in the weeds a little bit, the minutia a little bit, you can kind of search back and identify these things and how rewarding it is when we do. Remember that change self-strategy, we recently talked about choose one good thing and one bad thing. That's something that we've listed before about building self-esteem. You know, what are you focused on? Are you focused on all these negative things about you? If you focus on one good thing, celebrate that, one bad thing, and build that up. Change it. You're probably going to come across some implicit biasness when you're changing those bad things. Because now you got two good things, choose only one more bad thing, work on that. That might be 6 months, guys. Really. That sounds crazy, but now you have three good things that you focus on and one bad thing, and so on and so forth, to where you build up these things about yourself. If you do that process, you will be attacking implicit biasness about yourself, or even about beliefs about the world. Objective, honest assessment of self. Take an inventory, such as AA. You know much about AA?
I don't.
It's a hell of a program. It really does a lot. I've heard it said it's the best for the most in recovery circles. And the process they go through is daring. It works for just life issues as well. I like to think about how living the 12 steps, non-alcohol or addiction-related, is an amazing thing. In fact, that'd be a cool show to do someday. Right? They search their moral inventory and they really look at themselves. They forget to list out the positive aspects of themselves. And unfortunately, they'll focus out and list all the things they've done and all the characteristics about themselves. And a lot of people will like bail out of meetings and bail out of the relationship with their sponsor before they get to doing this particular, I think it's like step 5 or 4, this fearless moral inventory of yourself. Can you imagine sitting down and listing all that, dude?
Sure.
Good, really?
I think I could.
Yeah. Intimidating, man. I don't know if I want to be that honest with myself.
Yeah.
And then step 5 is actually share it with another. And I think like step 6 is like, and ask for the ability to remove some of these defects of character. It's crazy. And again, if you do a list like that and you're really looking at that, you will be touching on implicit biasness for sure. F is a gratitude list. Powerful, kind of like the feel-good file. What are you really grateful for? It gets you out of some of the negative thinking that you could do, replaces you in a good one when you feel something negative really pulling you back. That's something to look at if you're paying attention and if you're mindful about things. Apologize when necessary and it does no harm to others. Think about what apology does, right? I've identified explicitly in my cognition that I screwed up, did something wrong. Now I'm going to offer you an apology, Matthew, because I shouldn't have said what I said there, and, me culpa, I hope you can forgive me. But that process of acknowledging that and going through an apology, particularly an involved apology where we have a conversation about something I did a year ago or whatever, you're going to be looking at, why did I do what I do? You might even ask me if I'm apologizing to you. Well, Chris, you're my boy. I appreciate it, and you're fine. No harm, no foul. We move on. But why did you punch me in the face a year ago? I don't really understand what you did. Now that we're good, can we talk about that? Like, why did you do what you did? Thus the title, right? Why do we do what we do? So when you're offering apologies and identifying that, you have an opportunity to touch on implicit bias. Refute negative messages that others are giving you unless they're true, and usually they're not. The world's going to give you a lot of negative messages, and you can believe them. You can try to blow them off and just let them get into your psyche, which they will. If I tell you you're a poor dresser, Matthew, enough, and we're really close and tight, and you value my opinion, what are you going to believe about how you dress? I'm picking on that, y'all, because he's an awesome dresser. The power of persuasion in human interactions. Do not misunderstand. Do not misunderstand. Do not devalue. They are powerful in the way that people perceive us. which, by the way, negative criticisms really hurt y'all. You have a critical person in your life, that is a lot of pain. It is a lot of negative implicit bias, particularly if you hear it over and over and over again. Boy, we can go down a bunny trail with that. Let me just pause real quick, and I'm aware of the time. I'm going to kind of fast forward through some of these other ones.
I was wondering if we're looking at a part 3 on this.
Yeah. No, but we could, right?
We really could.
Why do you say that? Let me tap into what you're feeling.
Looking at the notes, because it's like as we have gone through this, each one of the things that we've come up with, like the 12-step, like the trust, like the iron sharpens iron, I mean, each of those could be a show. You can take that into full-on podcast, just each one of those topics.
That's why I tell Neil I'm a content pit, man. Because these are involved, dynamic things that we're all experiencing. Yeah. So so what word might fit there? I just wanted to tap into what you're experiencing with our conversation. Kind of a sense of awe at how involved these things can be, or an overwhelmed feeling, or a fuzzy lostness. I mean, what is that?
Just a discovery process, because these topics, there's so much substance there that almost feels like we're doing injustice just to mention it and then move on just for the sake of time, because there's just so much depth to each one of those.
And I'm glad you said that, and I'll make the point that we talk about these things on the show. Some of these, they're not repeats and rinse and rewash. They're how do we apply these things? How do they interact with what we're doing? The idea that we're looking at today is why do we do what we do? Last week was why do we believe what we believe? But you see the overlap. It's really implicit bias part 1, part 2. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
But it impacts what we believe. And it also impacts what we do. It also impacts our experience with anxiety. We're not talking about that tonight. But so we cover these things, and if you stick with us, you begin learning them and whatnot. Let me fire through a little bit here because I'm aware of the time. Unfortunately, wouldn't it be like to have Joe Rogan's 3-hour deal? We should think about that, Neil. I don't know. Well, maybe not. You want to stay here till 10 today?
We'd have to get started a little earlier, or bring food in. And had dinner.
Oh, no, you poor dude. This one's a hard one here. Confront those that are mean to us in the present. Stop a bully. Tell them to back off. Tell them to stop. And then get objective third party if you need. We did do a whole show on that one, very early on. When you are confronting people that are mean to you, you are probably also directly confronting an implicit bias, as well as developing assertiveness and positive self-esteem. And that's, again, another example of overlap. But that negativity that you're getting from that person can be inadvertently installing stuff in your experience, particularly as a little kid. So when you're teaching your son or your daughter to stand up to a bully, you're potentially installing some implicit bias, some beliefs about themselves. And then when they execute that, they're confronting it inside themselves. Pretty cool thing, but it's really hard to confront people. I know you might disagree with that, but listen to those past shows and you'll understand what I mean. Use the intellect to confront the negative core beliefs, which is likely a part of our emotional brain. Hard to do, but not impossible. I'm just going to mention that because that's what therapy's all about. Let me say that again. Use the intellect to cognitively confront the negative core beliefs, which is likely embedded or an automatic process in your emotional brain. Hard to do, but it can be done. It's not impossible. I do it all day long. Radical acceptance, part of a program called dialectical behavioral therapy, augmented to radically accept self. Radical acceptance is accept at the basic terms and turn your brain off, confront your brain that refutes something that you're trying to radically accept. And you're going to rub up against implicit biasness. Reframe, develop a different perspective out of a new truth. We're learning new things all the time. When you come across new information, COVID, right? Which seems like we get new information every week. Well, that's going, and it's okay that we do because it's new. I don't know why people get so bothered about that. Somebody changes their mind. What's new information? We get new life lessons. We get new life experiences. We get new tragic events that happen in our life. And those are opportunities to examine, wait a minute, what did I previously assume that I now have an opportunity to relearn, right? Leave yourself positive messages. Is this a simple thing? Again, the feel-good file kind of concept. meditate on the positive message. What did I say? Sounds woo-woo-woo-y. I like the word psychological woo-woo because there's garbage junk that we talk about, don't understand, and is like hard to grasp. But honestly, it can work. Let me see. Oh, yeah, I said Craig's house that day with his meditative channel. Meditate on positive messages. That's probably a good way to wrap up. And then check the show notes out, y'all, because there's a whole article that I didn't get, and it actually talked about some of the same things I've talked about, I'm sure. To understand maybe religious beliefs, sermons, self-help books, religious texts that you're reading, when you're flooding your brain with all of that, you might not really even know, what's happening. But when you're trusting the source and you're getting good sources, good financial advice from a financial planner that you trust and value, he's going to tell you the same message maybe 5 times over the course of 10 years. Your medical doctor is going to talk to you about medical things that, and they work on you. And you let that happen. You just let that seep in, right? That's going to automatically challenge your implicit bias. So I'm hanging out at Craig's house, right? You know how he is. He's got this stuff on the...
Was he in his ice bath?
No, that's a whole other topic. No, it was not in his ice bath, but he's got this stuff on the TV, Matt.
Okay.
Matthew, sorry.
Yeah.
Matt. Calming sounds, waves,
yeah.
Beautiful pictures of cars and people, and the words just written on there. You are powerful.
Mm-hmm.
You are wealthy. You are all-knowing in your own truth. And it's just, and I was tired that day. We were getting ready to record. I'm hanging out, waiting on Craig to do his stuff and whatever. And it was probably like 6 minutes, man. And I was just sitting there in a chair, just, hanging out. And I got up ready to record, and I was like, dude, I am way mellow to do this show. and I realized what had happened. Half the time, I wasn't even looking at the TV, Matthew. Yeah. But it washed over me. Mm-hmm. It was really, really cool. Does that sound crazy?
Oh, no.
That is touching your subconsciousness.
No, that's, what was being sent out there, you're just let it wash over you.
Yeah. Your subconsciousness is your ally. It will work for you. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you in wrapping up here, allow your spirit to work for you. Like Casey said, you are enough. I loved her message with that. And understand that there are things in the world that are working against you, but you are all powerful in your own spirit. No professional is more professional on yourself than you are. And I want you to have a lot of hope about all the positive implicit biases that you have, but also understand that the negative ones that really rub you wrong, that are hurting you, you absolutely can go through this process with a safe individual in your life and really change core pieces of you where you're in control of you. So I hope that's a positive message people really kind of get. Closing thoughts real quick or anything to add, and we'll get out of here.
It reminds me of, we had a certain CD that we would always play when we put our kids to bed, and it was, I think the name of it was actually Washed in the Word. It was just scripture.
Yeah,
It was just lullabies and scripture.
Yeah.
Just all night long, just let it wash over them.
It is working.
So
it is working.
It's because it works even when you're sleeping, right?
Ah,
I mean, it happened when you were sitting there. So, but you're
if
unconscious.
it can work in the womb, like you talked about last week, it can work when you're sleeping.
There you go.
Y'all have a great week. We'll see you soon. Take care.